You're watching Next Pitch, the student athlete playbook for parents raising tomorrow's athletes.
Hi, my name is Anthony Leverett, host of the Next Pitch podcast, and we are doing a series on the life cycle of the student athlete, from getting involved in sports all the way through becoming an elite athlete. And today we have a very special guest, Mike Nolan. I won't call him Mike Nelson. Mike Nolan, good friend of mine. And although he might not talk to me after I call him Nelson, good friend of mine who I worked for. Underneath him is the athletic director at Ida B. Wells Barnett High School, formerly Wilson High School. He's been a high school teacher, a high school coach. He's a parent. He's dealt with parents, and I think he will add a lot to this conversation that we're having about youth athletics, high school athletics. Mike, it's great to have you here. Welcome to the show. Thank you for taking the time to come into the studio. A lot of my guests are remote. It's great to have you sitting across from me here. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
So let's dive into your background first, right? I think everybody's got a unique story that's part of sports, and I want yours is fascinating. And if you were a professional athlete, everybody would know that you grew up living in a yurt. So I want to hear kind of your sports background and kind of how you got involved in this and where you grew up.
Okay. I grew up in Monroe, Oregon.
Oregon, yes.
Small 2A.
Find that on a map.
Town, exactly right.
Yep.
27 kids in my graduating class. Lived in a geodesic dome growing up.
My fault, not a yurt. Geodesic dome, even better.
Yes, exactly right. Farming town, very rural. Grew up on a farm, grew up farming in the summer times, driving tractor, moving pipe, all that fun stuff, right? Learning how to get into good trouble.
Yeah.
And athletics was a big part of my life. When we moved up here, when I was 7, we moved to Corvallis, Oregon, and lived right across from Gill Coliseum. And one day I was playing with my basketball, and I went over to Gill Coliseum and walked in the door, and I saw this guy smoking a cigarette, and he's yelling at these guys on the basketball floor. And he looked at me and goes, "What the hell are you doing here?" And I go, "I don't know." So Ralph Miller told me to go down and be the ball boy for the Beavers, 1980-81. Lester Connor, Ray Bloom, all those guys, So sports in general, big part of my life. Played 2 sports in high school, basketball, baseball, had a good time, had a lot of success, great group of guys. And then I made my way to college. I was going to play some basketball in college. I had a couple of offers to play baseball, places I just couldn't afford. Is what it is, right? And then moved my career into wanted to become a social studies teacher. Had an amazing social studies history professor down at Southern Oregon. He was a ex-CIA. I'd go in his office. He'd tell me all sorts of great stories. He was on Idi Amin's camp for a bit.
Oh, wow.
Then I made my way to Forest Grove, Oregon, where I started my coaching career. Cut my teeth coaching girls basketball, baseball, and had a great time. And then I made my way to the PIL at Benson High School and continued the same thing. Coached basketball, coached baseball there. Had a great time. Coach for Don Emery, legend in Portland Public Schools and PIL. Had a great experience there. And then budget cuts happened. I made my way to Wilson High School. And, Mike.
What year was that? What year?
2001.
2001.
2001.
Okay.
Yeah. And I wasn't coach at the time because we had a young family. But as soon as I got the girls a little bit older, started getting back into basketball. And I became the head women's basketball coach in 2005, took over from Kendra Gardner, and was the head women's basketball coach 2016. And I've been the AD since then. So
as you were, you talked about having a young family. And I think when you're talking to your coaches now, we're going to get into being an athletic director, but I think that just starting there, when you are talking to your young coaches about, I've got a family, I'm a high school coach, I want to put every single thing that I have into it.
Yeah.
What's your advice to them as you're kind of mentoring and helping them? And I know, for athletic directors out there, Mike, I'm going to ask him about this as we go, but really not just managing the program, right? It's not just putting out chairs. It is, it's teaching and training of young coaches and making sure your athletes have great experience. We'll get into that. But what is your advice to them as trying to be a dad, a husband, and a coach?
Oh yeah, I live that world. It's tough, and you as well.
Yeah.
First things first, don't ever lose sight of your family.
Yeah.
100%. Because once you start worrying about X's and O's at 12 o'clock at night, or a practice plan or something else, something's going to give.
Right.
And, having the support of your family is number one in the book of coaching, period. Especially with young kids. And you don't want to miss out on the experience you're going to have with your young kids as well, because you're never going to get that back. Right. Basketball is unique. As you know, it's the longest sport. It's November to March, right? And you're inside the building and you're grinding day in and day out. And I always tell our coaches, man, you have to be reflective. You have to sit back. You have to understand that your family comes first. And when you start losing sight of that, the kids you're coaching, they're going to suffer. And number two, you're a parent, and you always have to view every one of those kids in your program from that role, from those eyes as a parent, and so meaning that those two translate. Those kids go home to families. Those kids go home. So you can't, the grind is the grind, but you also have to understand that you can't grind.
Yeah. And is that the biggest mistake you see young coaches make that end up, because I know, especially, I'm far more immersed in basketball over the years, and you see a lot of young coaches get in and then out and never come back to the sport. And I've seen it happen with kids that I've coached. I've seen it happen in the league when I was working for you at Wells. Really good coaches, young women especially at that time, get in and get to the grind and then never come back. And the game needs really good coaches. Is that the biggest mistake you see people make, or you see other ones?
I see two things with that. First one is, sometimes young coaches, what you have to address with them is you have to understand it's process. When you start focusing on outcomes, that's when you start losing sight of what's the big picture, right? You start losing sight of, hey, these kids come in with all sorts of different experiences, life experiences. They come in with things you don't know about, right? So you have to be cognizant of that, number one. And if you're worrying about the outcome, then you've lost focus of what's going to be best for these kids. So yes, that's part of it. And time management also is a big factor in that as well too. But I would say when young coaches come in as an athletic director, as a group of coaches, you have to let them understand and help them understand that if you start focusing on what the outcome is, you've lost what the most important thing is those kids coming in need to build a foundation of success. And that comes from the process of getting there. Right. And then year after year, you kind of figure out what's next. What did I do well? Right. Did I not practice plan effectively, right? Was I not reaching out to these kids? Was I not spending time with these kids on a one-on-one basis, trying to figure out who they are, right? What makes them tick, right? And because ultimately you're going to get more out of them when you understand who they are as a person first.
So it's so amazing. You just said, I got the opportunity to interview Steve Corey, and 33 years as the head football coach at Lake Oswego High School, which is mind-boggling to be somewhere for 33 years have the success he's had. But he talked about that, right? And I think that point bears repeating. He said it as his job is to make sure the 65th kid in the program has the same experience as the first kid in the program. Number one kid's going to get all the fun and playing time and the accolades. It's that 63, 64, 65 that he needs to make sure they have a great experience. And I think that advice for young coaches is critical. Let's talk about.
So can I add one thing to that?
Yeah, please. Yes.
So
you're my boss still, man. You're always the boss.
Love that. When we have our coaches meeting, we're always very intentional about making sure that we address the needs of the student athletes first. And what you said is critically important, because you're right. Your stud athlete is going to get all the accolades. You're going to get athletes of the week. They're going to get that. But more importantly, finding out what might make them tick. And we do a little exercise, and it's simple. Right. And I would recommend any new coach doing this. You put on a 3x5 card. It's the simplest thing you do. One thing I wish my coach knew about me. And you will get back stuff that you might never have known.
Priceless stuff.
100%.
Yeah.
And you open the door, you just build relational equity with that kid that you'll never, ever have to worry about. Right. Yeah. Them knowing that you can trust them and they can trust you. You could get, I'm coming from a broken home. My parents might be getting a divorce. Yeah. So when they come into practice, right, you know that, hey, they might need a little extra attention and a little extra just love and support for sure.
Yeah. And I think that getting to know that kid is critical. And I don't know if this is the time for me to talk about this, but it's one of the things that, we do at the end of every segment here is we have our little crystal ball, reverse crystal ball. And I do think this bears talking about even more so, because we are in the business of educating young student athletes, right? And
Mhm.
athletics is, I believe, the best classroom for that.
100%.
But having them give you information about themselves in whatever way that you can get that one-on-one, 3x5 note card, have them, I had my players write a paper and give me their, their plan for their build their crystal ball for the future. Right. So I knew what they wanted and we could support that. But just making sure that you take that time to have a plan. And I think you used the word intentional. I've heard you say intentional a lot over the time I've gotten to know you, is that just having that intentionality about what it is that you're going to do with your program.
And that comes from you. And it also shows that you care about the kids. When you are being more intentional with yourself, because we can't forget, right? You have to be reflective as a head coach. You have to be reflective as a coach. What am I doing to reach these kids on a personal level? Because all the evidence shows, and you're exactly right, athletics is a vehicle for so many different opportunities.
Absolutely.
Number one. So if you understand that and can grapple with that and wrestle with that, that's important. Number two, that kid will then buy into your program even more. You're going to get more out of that kid, right? They are going to be a better teammate. Yeah. They're going to be a better person. But more importantly, they're going to remember 10 years later, man, coach knew that he cared about me. Yeah.
That's
period. Dot.
It's 100% right. And to your point, though, and I think that I didn't know we'd dive into this deep, but this is a critical thing for coaches to know. I believe that fear is a motivating factor.
Sure.
But it's a short one.
100%.
Right. And eventually fear goes away and becomes apathy for the person that you fear. If a kid knows that you care about them, you care about their future, you care about their life outside of the gym, they care about you, that kid is going to do more for you in between those lines than if they're just scared of you to perform. So trying to figure out that holistic plan to making sure that that kid has an experience from being cared about first, you're going to have a better player.
Oh, 100%. And when we talk about process and outcomes, your outcomes are going to be better at the tail 100%. End of that, because you've spent the time, right? You've followed through on the process and you've been intentional about making sure that you reach those kids. And we've talked about this before too. When you get into the grind of coaching, sometimes you just get going.
Yeah.
And I tell our coaches all the time, right? You get going. I understand that, but you have to take time out of practice, out of any moment that you have, to spend time to intentionally get to say, hey, let's dial it back. What's going on?
Right? I think we're going to have you back and we're going to just dive into this.
Yeah.
How to. I think there is so many. I want to talk to you about a bunch of different things today, but I think we can have you back on here. And I think we can just really take a deep dive into how to create that atmosphere for a player. I think that'd be a fun conversation. So we'll get you on the calendar for later. All right. So we'll move on to the next topic here. Youth sports, right? I take over as a varsity basketball coach, varsity football coach, varsity baseball coach. Lifeblood of your program is your youth program. How do you go about helping your player, your coaches, or what's your advice to them in implementing that youth program and their involvement in that?
Sure. Vertical integration, as you just said, is extremely important, right? You want to keep the kids in your community and you don't want them coming to your high school and playing in your program, right? So that is your pipeline. That is your lifeline, right?
Yeah.
So number one, you have to start with investing into your community, meaning that it starts with meetings with parents. It starts with meetings with your schools that the kids are coming from, right? Figuring out what makes them tick, who's in the building, okay? Then you got to put a thoughtful, articulate plan of what that looks like from kindergarten to when they become 8th graders, right? And if you have foundational things like, we have a Be a Guardian initiative at our high school, right? And you want those kids to be a guardian when they come in, right? Some of it's being gracious, some of it's energetic, some of it's just being humble, right? And if those are your foundational pieces that you're talking about in your high school program, then you need to find an intentional way to make sure those kids understand when they come in, this is who we are being a guardian, right? So on a just kind of a holistic level, right, of what a guardian is, that's what you have to have. Then it's the experience those kids have. You need to find coaches, hopefully not parent coaches, because they can be either great or they can be a nemesis, right? We've experienced this together. And you want to make sure that you have people in the right spot who are going to be, speaking the same language all the way through. I look at our football program, when our football coaches took over, we were in disarray. And
that's very kind of you to say disarray.
That's
the athletic director word.
There you go. Exactly. 100%. But they have built a foundation of what it means to be a guardian football player. And they don't deviate from that, because once you deviate from that, then all of a sudden you're transparent. People see through you.
Yeah, you lose credibility.
Parents see through you.
Yeah.
You lose credibility.
Yeah.
Now, each sport is going to be specific in terms of what you want taught.
Yeah.
But you have to have some plan for that as well, too, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's basketball and you're talking about basic fundamental skills, that has to be taught.
Yeah.
It's going to vary. There's no doubt about that, because you can have different classes that have different athletes, right? But you have to have some articulate plan of what that looks like, right? Again, I use our football program.
Yeah.
Every kid coming into our high school football program knows every single piece of terminology when they come in. A fifth grader knows what the wing tee is all about.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that is extremely important, because you're teaching
Yeah.
and coaching.
Yeah. So that terminology thing, man, I forget how much I enjoy talking to you. So the language of your program.
Yes.
So I believe it's like if you were to walk into my office during I was at the University of Utah, or even working for you and we're going through Scout. Well, I didn't have an office at your place, but walk in and you listen to a group talking, it could sound like Greek to you, right?
Yeah.
But so long as all of your players understand that terminology, it matters. You think putting that and getting that engaged, and this is a leading question, but getting them engaged in that terminology and that process as a young person helps them be more successful going forward?
100%, because part of it is the coaching.
Yeah.
Part of it is the X and O's. Part of it's the scheme. Part of it's whatever fits into whatever you're doing as a head coach, right?
Yeah.
Running motion offense, all those little things. Obviously going to vary age to age, but the foundational pieces of that, when they come in, they're going to be set up for success. Coaching part. Let's get to the person part.
Yeah.
Right. Again, if you have some form of, again, at the high school level, again, I use us as an example. We're guardians. We know what a guardian means. We know what it is to be a guardian. So when they come in, they have a foundation of us as a student athlete, as a person. This is who we are.
Yeah.
And that again, talking about process and outcomes, your outcomes are going to change because the process you led them, engaged them, help them learn. When they come in, you're going to get more out of them as a student athlete. Right?
Yeah. No, I love it. Okay. Let's talk about parents.
Okay.
You just brought up the word parent with your coaches, and can be nemesis, and also parents can be super helpful depending on
100%.
how you build that community. But you have obviously, how many sports do you guys have at your school? What's
19?
It's 19 sports, right? 19, 20 sports at any high school. So it's a massive amount of kids and programs to manage, male, female, all the dynamics that go with that. What is your message to your coaches? If coaches are listening out there, either struggling with parents or getting involved in a program and want to make sure they create that foundation for a great parent relationship with their kids, with their program, what is it that you advise them and how to handle that?
That's a long-winded question and a long-winded answer, right? So I'll use the high school, what we do as a high school, at the high school level. First of all, you have to actively engage your parents. And what I mean by that is you need to effectively over-communicate. If you don't effectively over-communicate what your mission, vision, goals, whatever that's going to be for your program, if you don't do that effectively, parents are then lost. So they then fill in the blanks, right? So number one, you really have to be, again, I call it effectively over-communicating, right? And that could be the simplest thing is, hey, practice plans change, right? Or whatever, right? Because you just lose credibility if you say practice at 3:45 and all of a sudden it's not at 3:45, you change it that day, right? And things happen, to get me wrong, right? But if you can effectively communicate what that is, right? That's important. Number two, whatever your stance is for your program, you need to have community investment into that. And you need to have community input and parent input as well. So what we do is we have a parent role document, and we ask our parents to actively engage with their student athlete. What are your goals as a parent for your student athlete? What if they don't reach that, right? What are your goals for your student athlete in their program? And what happens if you don't reach that? So it's a document that they use to get those kids to engage with their parents, right? And then we use that as supplemental information, right, from our parents in our community as well, too. And then you got to find your difference makers, right? You got to find your people who are going to be the folks out there promoting your brand, if you will.
Someone who's 100% bought into you and your program, and what
who
you're
are going to
doing.
be in the stands. And you're never, ever going to convince everybody, right, of what's going on in a positive way. You're just not. I mean, that's just a fact.
Yeah.
But if you're doing all the things along the way to get them involved and feel that they are invested in the program, then you'll start seeing the return on that investment. So you got to find your folks that you're going to be out saying, hey, this is what we're doing in terms of fundraising, right? This is what we're doing in terms of community building. We
give them a job.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep them busy.
Yes, keep them busy, right? We're big in community service. We try to find ways to have our parents help our student athletes give back to the community, right?
Yeah.
So that investment, I think, along with, again, staying true to your intentions and staying true to the culture you're going to build, because once you deviate from that, you've lost your parents. I mean, I could keep going, but it's a long-winded.
Yeah.
And again, the biggest thing is, right, being upfront with your parent community, right? Being honest with them, obviously, right?
Yeah.
Setting clear expectations for your student athletes.
Yeah.
And having roles for every kid in your program, because
Yeah.
if they don't know where they are in the program, they're going to go home, right? And they're going to have that kitchen table talk with their mom or dad, and they were the former coach or they were the former player, and they're going to tell you everything that kid's not doing or a coach not doing right.
Well, and I think that goes back to the over communicating, right?
Yeah.
Like both with the parents and with the kids.
Yes.
Because I really do think, you correct me if I'm wrong, you get parents that reach out to you
All the time,
right?
Every day.
Every day. At every now and again, it'll be a coach that has done something wrong, right? That does happen. Coaches aren't perfect,
Sure.
but that's not the majority of things. Most of these people who are coaching high school athletics are good human beings
100%.
that want to be involved in teaching and helping young kids. What it almost always comes down to is playing time.
Yes.
So and they can say all the other stuff they want. If the kid is playing 30 minutes a game, there'd be no problems.
No.
Right. So what is that conversation like proactively in the middle of the season? How do you have, I know you know how I did it, maybe not be the best model to do it, but how do you teach your coaches to manage that conversation, because it's gonna happen?
So that's a big one. So I think early on, you have to set the expectations as a coaching staff. And what I mean by that is what expectations you have and what criteria you have for becoming a starter, earning minutes, etc. Right? But I think that also distills down to the fact that you have to give every kid, and you have to clearly articulate what their role and responsibility on a team is.
Yeah.
And that comes, let's say it's a cut sport, right? Like basketball.
Yep.
That's our world, right?
Yep.
5 kids on a court, 12 kids on a program, 7 on a bench. Some of those kids are going to get playing time. Some of them aren't. So at the beginning of the season, when you're sitting down forming your teams, you have to be very, very direct and intentional with the kids, right?
Yeah.
Who you've assessed, hopefully in a very subjective and objective way.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a fact.
Yeah.
Right. And have a clear conversation with them early on. Hey, this is your role right now.
Yeah.
It could change.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to educate them on what they need to do to get better. Because what happens 9 times out of 10 is a coach will say, you got to work harder. Okay. Do I got to sweat more? What does that mean? Right. And that's not being intentional about what they can do to be better. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it starts there. And then if parents understand, I know my son or daughter's role in the program, then when we have those conversations, like, okay, look, do you know what your son or daughter's role in the program is?
Yeah.
Have you had those conversations?
Yeah.
Did you fill out your parent role document? Right. Are you living up to your standards that we have for you as a parent? Are you a chemistry creator? Are you a chemistry killer? Because right now it sounds like you're becoming a chemistry killer.
Yeah.
Right. And that happens all the time. The car ride home. I mean, I learned that early on with our own kid.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost drove him out of basketball because I had that terrible talk in the car ride home. Right.
You didn't take my advice. And I'm telling you, it's hard to take that advice as a parent. It's really hard.
You know as well as I do, former athletes, former coaches, we want to immerse ourselves, and you have to take a step back.
Yeah.
You have to.
You
right?
do. You
have
do.
to.
We actually had to start taking 2 separate cars so that my daughter wouldn't continue to talk to me because we wanted to keep the rule in place.
But just kind of rehash, going back, it really comes from that relationship that you want to build with your student athletes, how intense you're going to be that, right? How much you're going to invest in them, right? And then turn that equity that you're going to build with that student athlete. And if they understand that when they go home and they have a parent or talk with their parent at home, coach told me I need to do X, Y, and Z because that's what they're doing. Now, at the end of the season, if those things don't translate, then we can have a conversation about that.
Sure.
Because there's the education piece that I can have with that coach. Like, hey, here's what you told them. This didn't come to fruition. How can we be better about it?
So I think the objective component is where a lot of coaches miss.
Mm-hmm.
because there is a lot of subjective reasons why you place somebody over somebody else, right? Like that just happens. But the thing I would recommend and for people to do and is build a job description for each position on your team. And I learned this from Gordy James many years ago. But this is what our point guard does. This is what our 2 does. This is what our 3 does. This is what our 4 does. This is what our 5 does. And it's about a paragraph long for each year, and it changes based on who your top point guard is and how you're playing. But give everybody in the program that job description so that they know I play the 4. This is what's expected of me. And every day in practice, I'm playing against the other 4s. And if that person's better than me, it becomes pretty clear. And then the ability for that kid to be able to work to that job description, just like they're going to do later on in life.
Yeah.
And if they don't like how much they're playing, this is such a great opportunity for them to learn about life. Like you and I are not going to be able to call our kids boss someday and say they need a raise or a promotion.
100%.
They're going to have to walk in and have that conversation. And if you have that job description, then they can come in and talk to that with you as a coach. You're helping that kid far more than just what they're going to get on the floor, but later on in life.
Well, you're talking about things that resonate, building resiliency, learning how to fail.
Yeah.
We have forgotten the fact that it's okay, right?
Yeah.
It's okay to learn how to fail.
Yeah.
I would also say that I'm saying maybe a bad word here, but we've bastardized the word competition.
Yeah.
We have made it to the point where, you're competing too hard, but no, that's okay.
Yeah.
That is okay. And if you as a coach can set up that environment, right, where healthy competition is good.
Yes.
Right. And learning to fail is part of that.
Yes.
Okay. It's going to make you a better person. Okay. It's going to make our team better.
Yeah.
Right. And you're exactly right. Later in life, when you're looking for that job or you're, in a situation where you want to move up the food chain, okay, I can recall back to this is what I need to do. I need to learn how to maybe fail.
Yep.
Right. And I got to learn how to be resilient here.
Yep.
So, I mean, those things, and those where you got to be intentional. You have to, as a coach, use that terminology.
Yeah.
You can't just be like, oh, well, work harder and blah, 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 blah. No, it's like, hey, it's okay to fail. I put you in this position, right? You were tested here, right? What'd you learn?
Yeah. I think your points are 100% spot on for at least from my point of view.
That's not because we're friends.
So, let's talk to some ADs out there.
Yeah.
Okay. You've been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
Deal with a large district. I think we have 58,000 students in the district, something like that now. All sorts of different dynamics that you have to deal with. Good coaches, maybe not as good coaches, right? You have strong personalities, maybe not strong personalities. As an athletic director or someone who's just becoming an athletic director, someone who's a coach right now, I'm thinking I might want to get into administration. What is your advice for them of how to handle? I mean, you're managing a lot of people.
Yeah.
What is your advice to help them with that skill set of being able to manage people?
So let's say somebody's just going to, let's approach it from the angle of somebody walking in day one.
Yep.
Okay. First of all, you got to listen. You got to figure out who's in your building. Who are your illuminators, right? Who are the ones that are rowing the boat together, right? And then you're going to find out might be who are your detractors, okay? And year one, it's all about figuring out what's working and what's not working, okay? And I also think from that standpoint as well, being an athletic director, which is a fantastic job, by the way. I mean, to all the ADs out there, you guys, man, salt of the earth.
High school athletic directors are some of the best human beings on the planet.
100%.
Yes.
Right. You have to be reflective in your practice. And I believe that leaders are readers. And I think that as you are getting into this profession, immerse yourself into works like Atomic Habits, like Simon Sinek, Brooks Cup, who wrote just a great book out there called Surrender the Outcome. Basketball coach, wrote it with Ryan Hawk. Find things that are going to energize you, allow you to be reflective, right? And give you voice in terms of how you're going to get the team to get on the bus together, right? I'm a big believer in giving coaches books as well. I mean, when you're onboarded in our place, you read Joe Ehrmann's book, all about what is your why about coaching. You read The Energy Bus, right? You read Chop Wood, Carry Water. And those things are all, pieces that you can build a foundation of who you want to be, right? Yeah. And then it's all about our. When I hear people talk like and I hear that stuff, it makes me, to be honest with you, it makes me cringe a little bit because they're not my coaches. They're our coaches, right? It's our community. And when you start investing in that terminology with the people in the room with you, you start getting more people to buy in, right? Because I'm not here to say what you're doing is right or wrong. We're going to assess that, but you're part of our team.
Yeah.
And so I think when you come from that angle, it allows people to be more willing to be vulnerable. And you, as an athletic director, you have to be vulnerable. You've got to open your doors up, right? You got to be willing to say, hey, the buck stops with me if something goes wrong. You have to be, share your story and share your truth. And you have to set the environment for those coaches to do that as well, too. So I think year one, finding out who they are as people. And then year two, it's okay, this is who we're going to be as an athletic staff. Maybe you already have something in your school that is there. Again, be a guardian or wherever it may be, right? What does that mean? What does that mean for your school, right? And then I think from there, it's figuring out, okay, now I'm going to assess programs. Now it comes with a challenge because some folks are TOSAs. They don't get to actually hire and fire. Some are admin, so they have a little more control over that. And then you got to start figuring out what is success. What is going to be our definitions of success as an athletic department and as coaches, right? It's easy to look at wins and losses. Yeah. That's simple. Do we have retention? Are kids coming back, right? Then we can start looking at kind of the vitality of what's going on in each program. And then year three, you build upon year one and year two. And again, every year you have to be reflective. Be a journalist. Write things down. Yeah. I mean, I have copious things of this worked well today. Yeah. This didn't work well today. Right.
Probably a lot from when you were my boss. Who the hell is this guy?
We had a great time. He just wanted a lot. We were not an NCAA Division I school. We only had one gym with hoops that had to come down with a machine.
I owe you a lot for putting up with me for 4 years. Well,
we had a great time.
On that question, back to the athletic director. So you coached and you coached well for a long time, right? You built a great program.
Yeah.
Now you're an athletic director.
Yeah.
Do you find, and there's that gratification that comes from coaching, a W and an L that you're directly, do you still get that same gratification and pain when you win and lose as a coach, or you see a kid, reach their potential, like that you're not directly responsible for, but you're responsible for all of it? How is that different for you, just kind of as your own satisfaction with the job of helping mentor kids?
Well, to your point, to one thing real quick, I've walked a mile in their shoes. Yeah. That's the vulnerability part, right? I've been on the winning end and losing end, right? So I can empathize and sympathize with them, right? So when you come into the profession, hopefully you've had some coaching experience and you can say, hey, I've done this with you. I know the grind, right? We can commiserate and collaborate together. That's what we call our coaches meetings, commiseration and collaboration time. To your point, to your question, hell yes. Yeah. I mean, you're never going to drop the coaching hat ever. You have to always kind of keep it on, right? You have to have that lens at all times, but you also have to make sure that you understand that you have a breadth and depth of a bunch of programs with kids coming from different backgrounds, different places, and different spaces. So it's extremely gratifying to see a kid go from his freshman year, not knowing squat about wrestling, to becoming a state placer. Yeah. I mean, that's not a testament to me. That's a testament to the fantastic coaches we have. Yeah. Or to see a coach build a program from the ground up, from the youth up, and we talked about earlier with some vertical integration, right? Yeah. So intrinsically, it's amazing. There's so many wonderful things about this job that, it gets lost in translation sometimes because you are working with the parent who's upset about X, Y, and Z, or a facility issue, or whatever that may be, right? But oh my gosh, God, it's very gratifying, and I'm very grateful for the work that I get to do.
That's cool. So last question here. You're not everybody that coaches in your program is a teacher, but many of them are, and that teacher high school coach thing, right? How do you got a principal that's the teacher's boss. Yeah. You've got an athletic director that's the coach's boss. How do we balance? And I know as a coach, if I was teaching, I'd probably put more time into my coaching profession than I did I just know the way that I'm wired. So what is the how do you balance that? How do you manage that with other people in the building? Or is that a question that's a little bit too close to the nerve ending to have a conversation about?
It's a great question, because I think there's a lot of components to that. First of all, in-building coaches are worth their weight in gold. Yeah. You can't
I do.
Having an in-building coach is extremely valuable for building culture, making connections. You're in the hallway, you see what's going on, your eyes and ears on the ground. So when we have an out-of-building coach, I always tell them this, and I've said this many, many times: find out who your kid's favorite teacher is
And hire them.
It doesn't mean they don't have to go and squat about soccer.
That's right.
Kevin Kilgore, one of our soccer coaches, he got high. I went to the soccer guys. Hey, just asked who their favorite teacher is. Oh, Kevin Kilgore. Kevin Kilgore has been an amazing soccer coach who has learned to be a great freshman soccer coach. He's eyes and ears in that building, right? So that's
brilliant advice.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's simple.
Yeah.
And again, they don't have to know anything about the sport.
Yeah.
And they might become a lifelong learner and want to learn more about the sport. So out of building coaches, that's what I recommend to them. Balancing the act between teacher coaches are a dying breed.
Yeah.
They really are.
I know.
It really, truly is.
And it's sad.
It is sad.
Yeah.
And it's hard to kind of quantify and qualify why that is.
Parents.
That's part of it. Well, that definitely is part of it,
and
for
you don't
sure.
Get paid enough
and you don't
to
get
deal
paid
with
enough.
that.
No,
right? No, I know.
We can distill it down to those two things for sure, easily. There's no doubt about that. But I also think, unfortunately, in some buildings, there's a trend where administrators don't see the value of having in-building coaches as much as they see another person.
Yeah.
And that's no slight to any administrator out there. They all do
it's just
great
the philosophy
things.
of where it is right now.
It's the trend.
Yeah.
It really, truly is the trend.
Yeah.
And the value add of having a coach in the building, like I said before, is words cannot describe the importance of that. And like I said, finding out, again, who's their favorite teacher and get them on board. And again, like I said, they don't have to know anything about that sport, but they are now part of your program for sure.
So I said this was the last question, but you know what that means, right? It means nothing, right? Like it's like it's like a preacher saying in closing when a coach says that this last one. No, it's not. So we talked about this off air, and I want to talk about it on the podcast, and I almost forgot. Emerging sports.
Yeah,
my daughter is a senior in high school. Her high school now is offering opportunity to play flag football.
Rad.
It's not an OSA sport yet, and I thought it was. I went to try to find the schedule online. It's not there, and we were talking about this before. Number one, can you explain what you believe the importance of adding these kinds of new opportunities for more people? And then second, how does that process work?
Sure.
I assume flag football is going to become a sponsored sport with the kind of the popularity that is football.
Yeah.
And how many sounds like schools are doing this now. Yep. But can you kind of explain that process for us?
So I think adding sports is amazing, right? Especially because we're adding boys volleyball, adding girls flag football.
And this is just for people listening. This is in the state of Oregon right 100%. Now.
Yeah. Some other states have already got it going on. We're doing it right now, getting it ready, right? So I think adding opportunities for kids who, hey, I want to play flag football. It's an opportunity for me to be out of school, be with kids, be coached. Amazing, right? We're doing the same thing with boys volleyball. So the process works like this. So for example, boys volleyball, it started as a club a couple of years ago. And then what happened is there's interest.
Which means they pay for everything,
100%.
Right? There's no taxpayer dollars or fundraised money from the school.
Zero.
For the club.
We're not providing transportation. We're not
That's
doing
the difference
anything.
between club sport versus
OSA
high school sponsored.
Sport. Yep.
Okay.
So then there's a couple of things that have to happen. There's a threshold marker that has to happen. And I believe it's 60%. I could be off there.
And 60% of schools in the state.
Yes, have to have that sport.
Per level or total?
Total, in totality.
Okay.
Now, what happens with some of these sports like boys volleyball, you're not going to see your lower 1A, 2As be able to maybe have a full team on their own. So they'll co-op together. So if they want to have it, they can do it just because they have low numbers and you know competing with athletes. But once you hit that magical threshold, and once you sustain that threshold, then the OSA delegate will say, okay, we're now an official OSAA sport. That's where boys volleyball is heading right now, and that's where girls flag football is heading. So, on a side note, I think just from my perspective, the seat that I sit in, volleyball needs to be a fall sport with the other volleyball season, just because it matches up well. There is still club volleyball in the world for boys, and that happens in the spring. So you're gonna have a push and pull. I'm kind of going off topic here, but girls flag football will, once they get that threshold, to become an official OSAA sanctioned sport.
So I'm all for, and I know you are too, with the kind of the sedentary lifestyle that leads from all the technology.
Get them off the phone.
It's the more opportunities to
Yes.
have them out moving their
Yes.
bodies and learning team sports,
Yes.
the better it is for them, for everybody, for society.
And your community.
Yeah. Okay. All right, man. Well, I sure appreciate you coming in. We end, and I am going to have you back. I think when we get done with this conversation, we're going to sit and have a conversation off air about that whole building that program.
Yeah.
I think there could be huge value just in back and forth on that. And we'll go through that. But one of the things we do with everyone, and I did with my players, is make them create their own crystal ball for their future.
Yeah.
Well, you and I are old and we're in our future. If you could build a reverse crystal ball and tell, young 14-year-old Mike Nolan getting out of his geodesic dome, walking uphill both ways to school in the snow. What advice would you give yourself based on where you've gotten to now?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say being a student athlete was a privilege. It was never a right. And I considered it to be a privilege. And I think that the first part of that, I never grappled with enough, being a student. So I would tell myself, you are a student first and not an athlete first. I was an okay student, but I grew up in a small town where most of my coaches were my teachers.
Right.
So it was
show up and you get
and you get a good grade.
Yeah.
And I don't think that necessarily prepared myself for when I got into college because I wasn't a good enough student.
Yeah.
Right. And I think for a lot of student athletes, and I'm painting a big broad brush here, they get caught up in the what ifs of after high school, I'm going to be the next this or that. And they forget that there's only 1% of those kids get to go do that stuff. Right. And what happens in the classroom is what's going to prepare you for the next step and being a more prepared, readied person for the world around you. So for myself, I just wish I would have been a better student.
That was the conversation I had in the car with my son on the way to school a couple days ago. I might have you have you give him a call. It's such an important thing, right? Because I think you said 1%, I think, is the pro, but 10% of all high school students play in college. 3% of them get a scholarship.
Exactly.
I think 1% is Division I athletics, right? Yep. So there is a life coming after that, whether it's after high school or whether it's after college, that you're going to have a job.
Yeah.
And those jobs are easier to come by if you've got that degree and you have that education behind you to walk in that door.
100%.
It's great advice. Yep. All right, man. Now this is I enjoy all the entire conversation, but my favorite part of this is that everybody's got to tell me a dad joke. Okay.
Got one.
So if you got a dad joke, I'm going to try not to laugh. Okay. But there's a good chance I might spit on you here. So
here we go.
All right.
You ready? This is a good one.
Okay.
There's a family of tomatoes walking down the street. You've heard this.
No, I haven't.
Okay.
But I can just seeing tomatoes walk down the street.
There's a family of tomatoes walking down the street. The baby tomato is lagging behind. So the mama tomato smacks him on the head and says, "Catch up."
So of course an athletic director has it's not a knock joke, it's a story, right?
Story.
That's the tomato family story. I love it.
Yeah.
That's how ketchup's
how ketchup's made.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks
Thank you for the
having
relationship. Me. Thank you for being my friend. I really appreciate you and everything that you do and all the athletic directors out there that do what you do. It's mostly unseen work.
It is.
But so critical to the fabric and the development and the growth of coaches first, and then the players underneath those coaches. So on behalf of coaches, thank you, and parents, thank you for what you do and what everybody out there like you does. And we will have you back on. Thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
Hi, Anthony Leverett here, host of the Next Pitch podcast, and just got done interviewing Mike Nolan, athletic director at Ida B. Wells High School here in the Portland metro area. And what a great conversation. Great guy, great insights, and had a whole bunch to say. And I, very unique relationship with him. I got the opportunity to coach under his leadership. I was the girls basketball coach at Wells for 4 years after I left the University of Utah, and just have an immense amount of respect for Mike and everything that he's done, and just the human being that he is. And just to sort of recap the conversation, the big thing, that we started with was advice to coaches having success. And I think, there's a whole bunch of things that you can talk about there, but I think the things that Mike really touched on was being intentional, having a holistic plan that is about both the kids that you have currently and the expectations for your program, but also getting involved in the youth program at a very, very early age and having a plan for what it looks like for a kindergartner through 8th grade and then obviously through high school. What is that plan for their lives as a student athlete in your program? And Mike talked about their football program. What is it to be a guardian? And everybody knows what that is, starting at a young age within all of their elementary and middle schools that feed into their high school. Be a guardian. What does that mean? And coming up with some sort of slogan, terminology, teaching your coaches of your youth people how to help build that program. That's going to help you with the long-term success, both of keeping your kids in your program and helping them build into the kind of athletes that they want to be. Then we dove into that parents conversation. What is the role of a parent in that athlete's life? And we talk about this a lot. And both Mike and I have made this mistake, so we're not perfect in this. But number one is to support your kids and support them in the way that is a positive experience for them. And we talk a lot about that car ride home, and he and I mentioned it again today, but just making sure that your kids know that you love them and you love watching them compete, and you're there for all the experiences that they're going through. And then as a coach dealing with that parent, something that Mike brought up is, give them a job. Get them invested, get them to be a supporter of your program, whether that's fundraising, community service, having them do the book, send them out with a video camera to go film a game for scouting report. Get those families involved and engaged in the grassroots, in the development and the building of your program, and really create a connection point there with those parents. And I think you'll see, based on Mike's experience and what I've seen over the years, I think you'll see parents be far more in line. And then I talk about this a lot. You just got to make sure that your parents know what you won't stand for. And almost always a parent's problem comes from lack of playing time. And that if you can make that expectation early on in your process with your team, with your families, that playing time is just not a topic during the season that we talk about. I think that you'll and hold true to that. You've got to stay firm to that. And if you do, then I think you'll have that far less problems with parents as the year goes by, as the years stack on top of one another and you're building your program. And then finally, first time we've talked about this is, what is an athletic director path to success? And I think Mike touched on a few things. I think one, especially as a high school athletic director, having coached and understanding and being able to empathize and commiserate with your coaches and understand what they're going through, I think it's critical. I guess it's not mandatory, but if you're thinking about being an athletic director, having had that coaching experience at some level is really important. And then if you do get a job as an athletic director, you just kind of listen that first year. Who are the people that are rowing the boat the right direction? Who are the people that are all about our school, all about our program, all about our students, and really finding out who is part of that hour, who's not a me person, who's a we person. And he talked pretty deeply about that. And then leaders are readers. That's Mike. I've heard Mike say that over and over again, and really diving into leadership. And not that you're going to take every single leadership book and do exactly what it says, but getting a breadth and depth of knowledge from people who've been in it and understand it, have lived that life that you're living, and taking parts and pieces from everything that you read and incorporating that into your day-to-day leadership style, I think is a huge factor in being successful in high school athletics. So again, I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm going to have Mike back on and do a deep dive into some other areas as well that, building a program. I think he has a lot of value to add, and I really enjoyed the opportunity to chat with him. Hope you did too. Until next time, we'll see you shortly on the Next Pitch podcast.